The train's whistle cut through the Wyoming dust like a knife through old leather. Eliza Hart pressed her face against the grimy window, watching the town of Dry Willow materialize from the shimmer of heat waves. After 3 days of rattling across the continent, her bones ached and her dress clung to her with dried sweat. But the letter in her worn carpet bag gave her strength. "End of the line, miss," the conductor called, eyeing her Eastern clothes with the same mixture of pity and suspicion she'd encountered since Chicago. Eliza gathered her belongings, one carpet bag, a small trunk, and what remained of her dignity, and stepped onto the wooden platform. The October sun blazed overhead despite the calendar's promise of autumn, and the wind carried a grit that stung her eyes and coated her teeth. The letter from Mrs. May O'Rourke crinkled in her pocket as she walked toward the main street. Asterisk position of cook and seamstress available immediately. Room and board provided, respectable establishment. It had arrived like salvation to their tenement in Boston, just as the factory cut wages again and her younger brother Timothy's cough worsened. Dry Willow stretched before her, a collection of weathered buildings huddled against the endless sky. The Grand Hotel, which looked anything but grand, squatted on one corner, while a general store, telegraph office, and several saloons lined the dusty thoroughfare. At the far end, she spotted the sign, O'Rourke's Boarding House, clean beds, hot meals. The bell above the door jangled as Eliza entered. The common room smelled of lye soap and beef stew, a combination that made her empty stomach clench. A woman emerged from the kitchen, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. She had iron-gray hair pinned severely back and shrewd eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. O'Rourke," Eliza ventured, pulling out the letter. "I'm Eliza Hart. You wrote about the position." The woman's face shifted from welcome to confusion. "I wrote to you." Eliza's heart plummeted as she handed over the letter. "Mrs." O'Rourke studied it, her frown deepening with each line. "This is my stationery, but not my hand," she said finally. "Someone's been playing games, using my name to lure folks out here. Happens sometimes, ranchers wanting cheap labor, or worse." The room tilted. Eliza gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles white. 3 months' savings for the train fare, Timothy depending on her wages, and now, "Sit down before you fall down, child." "Mrs." O'Rourke said, her voice gentling. She poured water from a pitcher. "Drink this." "I can work," Eliza said desperately. "I can cook, sew, clean anything. I just need—" "Easy now, Mrs." O'Rourke studied her with those sharp eyes. "Can you really cook? Not just Eastern tea cakes, but real food for working men?" "My mother ran a boarding house before she died. I've been cooking for 20 since I was 12. A commotion in the yard interrupted them. Through the window, Eliza saw a man wrestling with a damaged saddle, cursing creatively as the leather refused to cooperate. He wore typical cowboy attire, worn chaps, a shirt that had seen better days, and a hat pulled low against the sun. "Jack Calloway." "Mrs.?" O'Rourke said, noting her gaze. "Works for the Running Star Ranch. They're actually short a cook since their last one lit out for the goldfields." She paused, calculating. "Tell you what, the Star boys eat supper here tonight. You cook it. If they don't complain, I'll speak to their foreman about taking you on." Hope flickered. "Thank you, "Don't thank me yet. These men work hard and eat harder. And that's good beef in my kitchen, you ruin it. You'll be washing dishes until you work off the cost." The kitchen was well-equipped but foreign territory. Everything was sized for quantity, massive pots, a stove that radiated heat like the mouth of hell, and a pantry stocked with unfamiliar cuts of meat and sacks of beans. Eliza rolled up her sleeves and set to work. She found a haunch of beef, tough but workable. Her mother's voice echoed. "Tough meat needs time and patience. Liza, like most things in life." Asterisk, she set it to braising with onions and what vegetables she could find, then turned her attention to biscuits. The altitude made everything different. Her first batch came out flat as pancakes. "Damn it," she muttered, then glanced around guiltily. "You'll be saying worse than that before long." She spun to find Jack Calloway in the doorway, having apparently fixed the saddle. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the careful way he held himself, like a man expecting trouble. His hands, she noticed, were scarred but surprisingly clean. "The stove drafts to the left," he said, "and at this altitude, you need less baking powder." He moved past her to the water barrel, and she caught the scent of leather and horse. Not unpleasant. "May send you to poison us." "I'm the new cook," she said, lifting her chin. "Temporarily." He filled a cup, drank deeply. "Free advice. That beef needs more salt. Men here sweat it out faster than they take it in." He set down the cup and moved to leave, then paused. "And don't let Toby sweet-talk you into extra portions. Boy's skinny but eats like a horse." He was gone before she could respond, leaving only the swing of the door and an odd flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with the heat. By evening, she had produced a meal braised beef that fell apart at a fork's touch. Biscuits properly risen this time, beans seasoned with salt pork, and a dried apple pie cobbled together from pantry stores. The Cowboys filed in 6 of them, ranging from the aforementioned skinny Toby to a grizzled foreman named Hank. They ate in focused silence that Eliza couldn't interpret. Jack Calloway sat at the far end, his attention on his plate. Finally, Hank pushed back and belched appreciatively. "May, if you're firing this girl, we're hiring her. Best meal we've had since Cookie left." Relief flooded through her as the others voiced agreement. Even Jack nodded, though he said nothing. "Wages are $25 a month, plus board." Hank continued, addressing Eliza directly. "You'll cook 3 meals a day. Help with mending and washing. Bunkhouse is off limits unless there's doctoring needed. We've got a separate cabin for the cook. It's small but private." "When do I start?" "Tomorrow, if you're willing. We'll send a wagon for your things." "This is all my things," she admitted, gesturing to her carpet bag. Something shifted in the men's faces, a recognition of hard times that needed no explanation. After they left, Mrs. O'Rourke helped her gather supplies. "The Running Star's good people," she said, "but it's isolated 5 miles from town, and there's been trouble brewing." "What kind of trouble?" "Water rights. Silas Crane owns the biggest spread in the territory, and he's been making noise about Coyote Spring claims the boundaries need resurveying. That spring feeds half the county, including the Star." "But surely the law—" "Mrs. O'Rourke's laugh was bitter. "Crane owns the bank, and the bank owns half the law. Deputy Pike tries, but she's just one woman. She, Nora Pike, first female deputy in the territory, and better than most men with a gun. But that doesn't matter when money talks louder than justice." That night, Eliza lay on a borrowed cot, staring at the rafters. Outside, coyotes howled in the distance, and the wind rattled the windows. She'd come west for a job that didn't exist, thrust into a situation she didn't understand, surrounded by people she didn't know. But she had work, honest work that would let her send money home to Timothy. That had to be enough. As she drifted toward sleep, she found herself thinking of scarred hands and advice about baking powder. Jack Calloway had noticed her struggle and helped without mockery or condescension, a small kindness in a hard land. The next morning came too soon. Jack arrived with the wagon as promised, handling the reins with the same quiet competence he'd shown with the saddle. He loaded her meager possessions without comment, then helped her onto the bench seat. His hand was warm and calloused against hers, withdrawn the moment she was settled. "Best hold tight," he said. "Road's rough." He wasn't exaggerating. The wagon jolted and bounced over ruts and stones, past sagebrush and scattered cattle. The landscape stretched endlessly, broken only by distant mountains that looked painted against the sky. "Is it always this big?" she asked, immediately feeling foolish. Gets bigger the longer you're here. He glanced at her. Some folks can't take it. The space gets inside their head, makes them crazy. And you? Been here 10 years. It suits me. They rode in silence until the ranch buildings appeared a main house, bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings arranged around a dusty courtyard. Her cabin sat apart, small but sturdy, with a covered porch and a view of the mountains. Spring's that way, Jack said, pointing toward a line of cottonwoods. About a quarter a mile. We haul water for cooking, but you can walk down for washing if you like. Just watch for snakes. Snakes, of course. Rattlers, mostly. They warn you before they strike. He helped her down, unloaded her things. Cookie left some supplies. I'll check your stove draft. Make sure it's drawing right. She followed him inside. The cabin was sparse but clean, a bed with a corn husk mattress, a table, 2 chairs, and a smaller stove for personal use. Jack knelt by the stove, adjusting the damper with practiced movements. There. Should burn true now. He stood, dusting off his hands. Breakfast is at 5. Men eat heavy before riding out. 5. She managed not to whimper. I'll knock first few days. Make sure you're up. He paused at the door. Word of advice. Keep your door barred at night. We're good men here, but riders pass through, and with Crane stirring up trouble. Thank you, she said, meaning it. For everything. He touched his hat brim and left. Through the window. She watched him walk toward the barn, his stride easy despite the slight hitch in his left leg she hadn't noticed before. Alone, Eliza surveyed her new domain. The cooking supplies were adequate. The larder stocked. Someone, Cookie, presumably had left a note detailing the men's preferences and which ones couldn't tolerate spicy food. She unpacked slowly, placing her few possessions carefully. Her mother's rolling pin, wrapped in cloth. The photograph of Timothy, already fading. Her father's compass, though what good it would do her here she couldn't say. As the sun climbed higher, she ventured out to explore. The ranch was bigger than it appeared, with corrals full of horses, a vegetable garden gone mostly to seed, and that promised line of cottonwoods marking the spring. She could hear water gurgling, a sweet sound in this dry land. You the new Cookie. She turned to find Toby, all knees and elbows and eager eyes. He couldn't be more than 16, though the sun had already started carving lines in his face. I'm the cook, yes, Eliza Hart. Toby Freeman. I wrangle horses, mostly, muck stalls, whatever needs doing. He grinned. That was fine grub last night, specially the pie. Thank you. She studied him, remembering Jack's warning. I suppose you're hoping for extra portions. His grin widened. Can't blame a fellow for trying. Help me haul water, and we'll see about pie. They worked companionably, Toby chattering about horses and ranch life while she organized the kitchen. She learned that Jack was the best hand with a lasso, that Hank had been foreman for 15 years, that the ranch owner lived back east and rarely visited. And Crane, she asked carefully. Toby's face darkened. He's trouble wearing a suit. Been pushing folks, trying to buy up land cheap. When that don't work, he shrugged. Things happen. Fences cut, water fouled, accidents. A chill ran down her spine despite the heat. What kind of accidents? The kind that make folks sell. He glanced around nervously. Anyway, that's tomorrow's trouble. Today we got work. The day passed in a blur of preparation. Dinner was a success, venison stew and cornbread that earned approving nods. Jack ate quietly, but cleaned his plate. As the men dispersed, he lingered. Need anything from town? I'm heading in tomorrow. Paper and stamps. If it's not trouble, I need to write to my brother. No trouble. He hesitated. Lock your door tonight. Crane's men were seen on the East Road. Before she could ask more, he was gone. She cleaned up, hauled water for morning, and prepared for bed as darkness fell like a curtain. The coyotes were howling again, closer now, and something, maybe just wind, rustled in the sagebrush. She barred the door, checked the window latch, and lay down fully dressed. Her father's compass sat on the table, its needle pointing steadily north, toward home and Timothy and everything she'd left behind. But her thoughts drifted west, toward scarred hands and quiet kindness and the spring that everyone seemed to covet. She'd come for work, nothing more. So why did her heart race when hoofbeats passed in the night, wondering if morning would bring Jack Calloway's knock or something worse? The moon rose, painting silver streaks across the floor. Somewhere, a horse whinnied nervously. Eliza closed her eyes and willed herself to sleep. One hand on her mother's rolling pin, a poor weapon, but better than nothing. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Tonight, she had work, shelter, and purpose. In this hard land, that was wealth enough. And if her dreams featured a certain cowboy's careful smile, well, the darkness kept its secrets. The coyotes sang her to sleep, their wild chorus a reminder that she was far from Boston's cobbled streets. Here, under the vast Wyoming sky, she would have to learn new rhythms, new dangers, new possibilities. The Virgin had indeed come west for work, but what else she might find remained unwritten in the dust and starlight. The knock came at 4:30, sharp and purposeful. Eliza jolted awake, her hand still clutching the rolling pin. For a moment, she forgot where she was, then the scent of sage and dust brought it back. "Miss Hart," Jack's voice, low through the door. "Time to start breakfast." "I'm awake," she called, her voice rough with sleep. She heard his boots retreat across the porch. The morning air bit sharp as broken glass. She dressed quickly, splashed water on her face from the basin, and hurried to the kitchen. The stove, thankfully, had kept its embers through the night. She coaxed it back to life, set coffee brewing, and began mixing biscuit dough. Her hands were already showing the work, tiny cracks forming despite the salve misses. O'Rourke had given her, back in Boston. She'd thought factory work was hard, but there, machines did the heavy lifting. Here, everything was manual, hauling water, kneading dough for 12 men, scrubbing cast iron pots that weighed more than her carpet bag. By 5, she had breakfast-ready flapjacks, salt pork, beans, and coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. The men filed in silently, still half asleep. Jack took his usual spot at the end, but this morning he watched her over his coffee cup. "You're favoring your right hand," he observed as she served. "It's nothing." He said no more, but after breakfast, he lingered. From his saddlebag, he produced a tin of something that smelled of beeswax and herbs. "Comfrey salve," he said, setting it on the table. "Works better than whatever May gave you. My mother used to make it." Before she could thank him, he was gone. She opened the tin, touched the smooth salve. It seemed too intimate, using something his mother had made, but when she rubbed it into her cracked skin, the relief was immediate. The days found their rhythm. Wake at 4:30, breakfast at 5, pack lunches for the men riding line, start dinner preparations, mending in the afternoon sun, always watching the horizon for dust clouds that might mean visitors, friendly or otherwise. Jack began teaching her to ride on Sundays, her one half-day off. "You need to know," he said simply when she protested she couldn't afford a horse. "Case you need to get to town fast." He'd chosen Buttercup, an aging mare with a gentle disposition and a weakness for apple cores. The first lesson was a disaster. Eliza couldn't find her balance, couldn't trust the massive animal beneath her. "You're fighting her," Jack said, steadying the mare as Eliza clung to the saddle horn. "Trust the saddle. Don't grip so tight with your hands." "Easy for you to say," she gasped. The ground looked impossibly far away. He moved closer, one hand on Buttercup's neck, the other near Eliza's knee, not touching, just ready if needed. "Breathe. She feels your fear. Makes her nervous too." Something in his calm certainty steadied her. She loosened her death grip slightly, tried to feel the horse's rhythm instead of fighting it. Buttercup's ears pricked forward, sensing the change. "Better," Jack said. "Now, just walk. I'll lead." They made slow circuits of the corral, Jack's patience seemingly endless. When she finally dismounted, her legs shook like jelly, but she'd stayed on. "Same time next week?" he asked, and she found herself nodding. The lessons became the highlight of her week, though she'd never admit it. Not just the riding, though she improved steadily, but the quiet companionship. Jack was different during these times, less guarded. He told her about the ranch's history, pointed out landmarks, shared tricks for reading weather signs. "See those clouds?" He pointed west one afternoon. "Mare's tails. Means weather coming, maybe 2 days out." "Good weather or bad?" "Out here, usually bad." But he smiled slightly, softening the words. It was during the fourth lesson that everything changed. They'd ventured beyond the corral, walking the horses along a trail that led toward Coyote Spring. The cottonwoods rustled overhead, and the sound of water grew stronger. "Is it true what they say about Crane?" she asked. "About him wanting the water rights?" Jack's jaw tightened. "True enough. Spring's been running Star Water for 20 years. Legal and proper. But laws change when money talks loud enough." They rounded a bend, and the spring came into view, a natural pool fed by underground sources, crystal clear and bordered by grass that stayed green even in drought. It was beautiful, an oasis in the harsh landscape. "I can see why," Eliza began, then stopped. Fresh surveying stakes had been driven into the ground, red flags fluttering like warnings. Jack cursed. Swinging down from his horse, he yanked up the nearest stake, then the next. His movements were controlled but furious. "Jack." "They were here this morning," he said tightly. "After we rode out." He wheeled to face her. "Can you make it back alone? I need to find Hank." Yes, I think so." "Follow the trail. Don't let Buttercup run. Bar your door when you get back." He was already mounting. "And Eliza, if anyone comes asking questions, you don't know anything about water rights or surveys." "Understood." She nodded, frightened by his intensity. He spurred his horse and was gone, leaving her alone with Buttercup and the whispering cottonwoods. The ride back tested every lesson he'd taught her. Buttercup sensed her nervousness and grew skittish. Twice, Eliza nearly lost her seat. But she remembered Jack's words, "Trust the saddle, breathe," and made it back as the sun touched the horizon. The ranch was in uproar. Men rode in and out, voices raised. Through the kitchen window, she saw Hank and Jack in heated conference with 2 other ranchers. Deputy Nora Pike was there too, a stern woman with steel-gray hair and a star on her vest. "It's legal, far as I can tell," the deputy was saying. "Crane filed the surveying request proper. Claims the original markers were placed wrong." "That's horse," Hank caught himself, glancing at Eliza through the window. "That's nonsense, and you know it." "Nora." "What I know and what I can prove are different things." "Unless you have the original survey documents." "A house fire, 5 years back," one of the other ranchers said bitterly. "Convenient, wasn't it?" Deputy Pike's face was sympathetic but firm. "Get a lawyer, file a counterclaim. But don't go pulling up stakes, that's destruction of property." After she left, the men's mood grew darker. Eliza served dinner to a silent table, the food sitting heavy in everyone's stomach. Only Toby tried to lighten things, chattering about a new colt, but even he gave up eventually. That night, Jack knocked at her door after dark. She opened it cautiously, found him holding a Henry rifle. "This was Cookies," he said. "You know how to use it." "No." "Then it's time you learned." He stepped inside the first time he'd done so since that first day. The cabin felt smaller with him in it. "This is the safety. This is how you load it." His hands moved efficiently, demonstrating. "You probably won't hit anything, but the sound might scare someone off." "You really think Crane would—" "I think men do desperate things when money's involved." He handed her the rifle, adjusted her grip, His hands over hers were warm, calloused, careful. Tuck the stock tight against your shoulder, or the kick will bruise you bad. She was acutely aware of his presence, the scent of leather and soap, the way his breath stirred her hair. Her hands trembled slightly, and not from the rifle's weight. "Steady," he murmured. "Breathe before you squeeze the trigger. Never jerk it." "Like riding," she said. "Trust and breathe." Like riding. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. "Keep it loaded. Keep it close. Any trouble, fire once in the air, then get ready to use it for real." "I don't know if I could shoot someone." "Then pray you never have to find out." He moved to the door, paused. "You did good today, getting back alone. Not everyone could have managed it." The praise warmed her more than it should have. After he left, she sat on her bed, the rifle across her lap. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a factory girl who'd never touched a gun or ridden a horse. Now she was learning both, taught by a man whose rare smiles made her heart race. The next days passed tense. Riders accidentally cut Running Star fence lines. A water trough was fouled with dead animals. One of the ranch dogs was found poisoned. Through it all, the surveying stakes reappeared each time they were pulled, like poisonous mushrooms after rain. Eliza found unexpected allies. Deputy Pike stopped by for coffee and woman talk, but her real purpose was checking on Eliza's safety. Benny Two Feathers, the half-Cheyenne blacksmith from town, appeared one afternoon with a newly sharpened set of kitchen knives. "Heard you were feeding the Star Boys good," he said, refusing payment. "Good food deserves good tools." Even prickly misses, more from the neighboring ranch, visited, ostensibly for recipes, but really to complain about Crane. "Man thinks he owns the whole territory. My husband's grandfather settled this land. We're not moving for anybody." The women's visits helped ease the loneliness Eliza hadn't admitted feeling. But it was the evening lessons with Jack she treasured most. He'd expanded beyond riding, teaching her to read tracks, predict weather, even throw a rope, though she was hopeless at it. "Why are you doing this?" she asked one evening as they sat on the corral fence, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple. "Doing what?" "Teaching me being kind." He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "My sister came out from Ohio 8 years ago. Thought she'd marry a rancher, have an easy life." His voice roughened. "She didn't know how to ride, shoot, or read the land. When her husband died of fever, she couldn't manage alone. Had to go back east, tail between her legs. Always thought if someone had taught her—" "What happened to her?" "Married a shopkeeper, has 3 kids. Happy enough, I suppose." He slid off the fence. "Point is, this land doesn't forgive ignorance. Better you learn now, while it's calm." But the calm was ending. That night, she woke to gunshots. Through her window, she saw flames dancing in the distance, the hay barn. Men ran with buckets, shouting. She grabbed the rifle and started for the door, then remembered Jack's warning. Stay put unless directly threatened. The fire was controlled before it spread, but the damage was done. Half their winter feed destroyed. In the morning light, Hank found horse tracks leading toward Crane's property, but as Deputy Pike pointed out, tracks proved nothing in court. "We need those original survey markers," Hank said over breakfast. "Has to be someone who remembers where they were placed." "Old Sam Henderson might," one of the hands offered. "But he's been touched in the head since his accident." "What about Agnes Moore?" Eliza suggested quietly. "She mentioned her husband's grandfather settled here. Maybe they have old papers." The men exchanged glances. "Worth asking," Hank decided. "Jack, take Toby in." "I'll go," Eliza said. Everyone stared. "Mrs. Moore knows me. She might talk more freely to another woman." "Too dangerous," Jack said immediately. "I can ride well enough now. And if I take Toby—" She met Jack's eyes steadily. "You said this land doesn't forgive ignorance. I'm not ignorant anymore." The argument raged, but eventually Hank agreed. Eliza and Toby would visit the Moore Ranch that afternoon. While the men kept working, they couldn't afford to look suspicious. As she saddled Buttercup with only a little help from Toby, Jack appeared. "Changed my mind," he said. "I'm coming with you." Hank needs you to come back safe." His tone brooked no argument. "Toby, you're staying. Someone needs to watch the ranch." The boy protested, but eventually agreed. As they rode out, Eliza felt the weight of the Henry rifle across her saddle. The sky was clear, but those mare's tail clouds Jack had taught her to read were forming in the west. Weather coming. They rode in companionable silence until they reached the border between Running Star and Moore land. Fresh surveying stakes dotted the landscape here too. "He's trying to claim the whole watershed," Jack said grimly. "If he controls the spring source, he controls everything downstream." Eliza was beginning to understand, including the town. And the railroad depot they're planning, worth millions, eventually. The Moore Ranch was smaller than Running Star, but tidy. Agnes Moore greeted them with suspicious eyes that warmed when she recognized Eliza. "Come for that receipt for apple pandowdy?" she asked, playing along. "Among other things," Eliza said carefully. Over tea that could strip paint, Agnes Moore revealed what they'd hoped. Her late husband had kept his grandfather's papers, including an original survey map from 1867. "Clear as day," she said, spreading the yellowed document on her kitchen table. "Coyote Spring and all water rights belong to Running Star. The marker was that big cottonwood, the one split by lightning and 40 paces due north." Jack studied the map intently. "This would hold up in court. Can we borrow it?" Agnes hesitated. "It's all I have of Albert's family legacy. We'll guard it with our lives," Eliza promised. "Just long enough to file the counterclaim." "Finally," Agnes agreed. She wrapped the map carefully in oilcloth. As they prepared to leave, she caught Eliza's arm. "You be careful, girl. Crane's not the only snake in these parts. There's talk of bringing in hired guns from Denver." The ride back started peacefully enough. Jack carried the map inside his shirt, and they took a different route to avoid notice. But as they entered a narrow canyon, Jack suddenly reined up. "What?" Eliza began. "Listen." She heard it, then hoofbeats behind them, coming fast. Without a word, Jack grabbed Buttercup's reins and spurred both horses into a gallop. Eliza clung desperately to the saddle horn as they thundered through the canyon. Shots rang out. Rock chips flew as bullets struck the canyon walls. Jack cursed, guiding them toward a cluster of boulders. They dismounted in a rush, Jack pushing Eliza behind cover. "3 riders," he said, checking his pistol. "Maybe 4. Eliza's hands shook as she unslung the Henry rifle. This was no longer practice. Jack peered around the boulder, snapped off 2 shots. Return fire drove him back. "Can you really use that?" He nodded at her rifle. "We're about to find out." He almost smiled. "Remember, breathe before you squeeze." The attackers were getting bolder, trying to flank their position. Jack moved to counter, leaving Eliza to watch their backs. She saw movement in the rocks above a man drawing a bead on Jack. Time slowed. Trust and breathe. She raised the rifle, settled the stock against her shoulder, found the man in her sights. Her finger found the trigger. The shot was impossibly loud. The man jerked, clutched his shoulder, and dropped his gun. Eliza stared, shocked by what she'd done. "Good shot," Jack called, firing at the others. The wounded man's retreat seemed to discourage the rest. After a few more exchanges, the hoofbeats faded. Jack was beside her instantly. "You hit." "No, I shot someone." Her voice sounded distant. "You saved my life." His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "Eliza, look at me. You did what you had to do." She met his eyes, saw something there beyond gratitude. For a moment, the world narrowed to just them, the smell of gunpowder, the racing of her heart, his hand warm against her skin. Then reality crashed back. They had to move, had to get the map to safety. They mounted quickly, riding hard for Running Star. Behind them, storm clouds gathered, those mares' tails fulfilling their promise. They made it back as the first fat raindrops fell. Hank took the map with reverent hands while Jack told the story. The other men looked at Eliza with new respect. "You'll ride with us to town tomorrow," Hank decided. "File this proper with the land office. Nora Pike can witness." That night, the storm broke in earnest. Wind howled around Eliza's cabin. Rain hammered the roof. She couldn't sleep, seeing again the man in her sights, feeling the rifle's kick. A soft knock made her jump. She opened the door to find Jack, water streaming from his hat. "Wanted to check on you," he said. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." He stepped inside, closing the door against the storm. "First time's always hard, even when it's justified." "How do you do it, live with the violence?" "By remembering why. What I'm protecting." He moved closer. "Today, I was protecting you. And you were protecting me. That's how it works out here. We take care of each other." She was crying then, the delayed reaction hitting all at once. Jack pulled her against his chest, held her while she shook. He smelled of rain and leather, solid and real. "You did good today," he murmured into her hair. "Brave as any man I've ridden with. Braver, maybe." She pulled back to look at him. "Jack, Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. Whatever she saw there stole her words. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he lowered his head. The kiss was gentle, barely a brush of lips, but it sent fire through her veins. He pulled back immediately. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "Don't apologize." She touched his face, felt the stubble under her palm. "Please don't apologize." They stood frozen, the moment balanced on a knife's edge. Then Jack stepped back, putting distance between them. "I should go. Dawn comes early." But he paused at the door. What's growing between us, it can't happen. Not now. Not with Crane pushing and danger everywhere. I won't risk you more than I already have." "That's my choice to make," she said quietly. "No, it's mine, because I'm the one who'd have to live with it if something happened to you." He opened the door, storm wind gusting in. "Bar this behind me. Keep the rifle close." Then he was gone, leaving her alone with the taste of him on her lips and a hollow ache in her chest. She touched her mouth, still feeling the brief pressure of his. She'd come west for work, nothing more. But Jack Calloway's hands had taught her to ride, to shoot, to trust. And now, with that single, careful kiss, he'd begun teaching her something else entirely, something that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with the way her heart raced when he smiled. The storm raged on, but inside her cabin, Eliza sat at her small table, writing by lamplight. The letter to Timothy would wait. Instead, she wrote in the journal she'd started keeping, trying to make sense of the day's events, of Jack's protection and rejection, of the violence she'd committed and the gentleness she'd received, of the way the West was changing her, shaping her like wind-shaped stone slowly, irrevocably, into something stronger than she'd ever imagined. Tomorrow would bring the trip to town, the legal filing. More danger. But tonight, she allowed herself to remember the weight of Jack's arms around her, the brief sweetness of his kiss, the promise of something that might bloom when the current storms passed. Outside, lightning split the sky, and thunder rolled across the plains. But Eliza no longer jumped at the sound. She was learning the rhythm of this land, its dangers and its possibilities. And she was learning, too, that sometimes the most dangerous storms were the ones that raged in the space between two hearts, waiting for the right moment to break. The morning after the storm dawned clear and cold, with puddles reflecting the sky like broken mirrors. Eliza rose before Jack's knock, unable to sleep after the previous day's events. She found him already saddling horses in the pre-dawn darkness, his movements stiff and formal. "Morning," he said without looking up. Morning, she matched his neutral tone, though her heart ached at the distance between them. The ride to town included Hank, Deputy Pike, and 2 other hands for protection. Jack positioned himself at the front of the group, as far from Eliza as possible while still maintaining security. The message was clear: what had happened between them was already relegated to the past. Dry Willow's land office occupied a corner of the courthouse, a squat building that smelled of ink and old paper. The clerk, a nervous man named Artemis Potts, went pale when he saw them enter. "We need to file a counterclaim on the Coyote Spring survey," Hank announced, producing the Moore map. That is... Potts dabbed at his forehead with a handkerchief. "Mister, Crane already filed his adjustment yesterday. The waiting period. This predates any adjustment by 20 years. Deputy Pike interrupted. "You'll accept it for filing, Artemis, or I'll want to know why." With shaking hands, Potts began the paperwork. Eliza noticed how he kept glancing at the door, as if expecting trouble. Her instincts, sharpened by weeks of ranch life, prickled a warning. "Jack," she said quietly. He was beside her instantly, their awkwardness forgotten in the face of potential danger. "Something's wrong." He followed her gaze to Potts, noted the same signs. Without a word, he moved to the window. His curse was low but vehement. "Crane's men, 6 of them, coming this way." "How much longer?" Hank demanded of Potts. 5 minutes, maybe 10. "Make it 3. Deputy Pike drew her sidearm. "Check the chambers. I'll handle Crane. You folks finish here." She strode out, badge glinting in the morning sun. Through the window, they watched her intercept Silas Crane and his hired guns. Crane was exactly what Eliza had imagined: a large man gone to fat, with cold eyes and an expensive suit that couldn't hide his brutal nature. "Can't stop a man from conducting legal business. Deputy," Crane's voice carried clearly, "can stop him from intimidating witnesses and clerks," Pike replied evenly. "You'll wait outside until Mr. Potts completes his current filing. And if we don't feel like waiting, then you'll be waiting in a cell instead." The tension stretched taut. Crane's men shifted hands toward weapons, but Pike stood firm. 1 woman against 6. Then, from the barber shop across the street, Benny. 2 feathers emerged, a shotgun cradled casually in his arms. From the general store, 2 more townsmen appeared, similarly armed. Crane's smile turned ugly. "This isn't over." "Never thought it was," Pike replied. Inside, Potts' pen scratched frantically across paper. His hands shook so badly that ink splattered, but the documents were legal enough. When he finally stamped the last page, Hank snatched them up. "Pleasure doing business," he said dryly. They exited through the back, circling to their horses. Crane and his men had withdrawn to the saloon, but Eliza could feel their eyes tracking the group's movement. "We'll have a hearing in 2 weeks. Deputy Pike explained as they prepared to leave. "Judge Mortimer will review both claims. Until then, nobody touches those water rights." "Think Crane will honor that?" Jack asked. Pike's smile was grim. "Not a chance. Watch your backs." The ride home was tense, everyone scanning for ambush. But they reached Running Star without incident. As they dismounted, Eliza noticed Jack favoring his left side. "You're hurt," she said. "It's nothing." "Let me see." When he didn't respond, she stepped closer. "Jack Calloway, you protected me yesterday. Let me return the favor." Something in her tone must have reached him. He followed her to her cabin, sitting stiffly while she examined the graze along his ribs, a souvenir from yesterday's gunfight he'd hidden. "This needs cleaning," she said, heating water. "Why didn't you say something?" Didn't seem important. She worked in silence, cleaning the wound with gentle efficiency. This close, she could see the other scars marking his body, the rough history of a man who'd lived hard. When her fingers brushed a particularly nasty scar on his shoulder, he tensed. "Stampede," he said quietly. 3 years ago, spooked herd ran right over me and Tom Garrett. I lived. Tom didn't. I'm sorry. Wasn't your fault. He stared at the wall. Wasn't even the cattle's fault. Just happens sometimes. Wrong place, wrong moment. And everything changes. She understood he was talking about more than the stampede. Jack, about last night. Is done. He stood, pulling his shirt back on. We've got bigger troubles than whatever this is between us. So we just pretend it didn't happen? Yes. He met her eyes then, and she saw the cost of that word. Because I meant what I said, I won't risk you, not for my own selfish wants. He left before she could argue, taking with him the warmth that had briefly filled her small cabin. Eliza sank into a chair, frustration and hurt warring in her chest. She understood his reasoning but chafed against it. Hadn't she proven she could handle danger? Hadn't she earned the right to make her own choices? The next days passed in careful avoidance. Jack found reasons to be elsewhere during meals, sending Toby or others for supplies she needed. The Sunday riding lesson was canceled. Too dangerous, Hank declared, though Eliza suspected Jack's influence. She threw herself into work, cooking with fierce determination. The men ate well, but meal times grew quiet without Jack's presence to bridge the gap. Even cheerful Toby seemed subdued. Don't mind Jack, he offered one evening, helping her carry water. He gets like this when he cares about something, pulls back, goes all stone-faced. Did the same thing with that school marm few years back. Oh, Eliza kept her voice carefully neutral. Sarah Winters, pretty thing, came out to teach. Jack started courting her, real proper-like. Then rustlers hit the Benson spread, killed 2 men. Jack decided it was too dangerous for a woman, broke things off. Toby shook his head. She married the banker's son 2 months later, safe as houses and bored to tears, from what I hear. Why are you telling me this? 'Cause Jack's the best man I know, but he's got a blind spot wide as Texas when it comes to protecting people. Thinks he knows best. Toby grinned. Course, you're not much like Miss Sarah. You shot a man to save Jack's life. That's gotta count for something. That night, Eliza lay awake thinking about Toby's words. Was she willing to become another Sarah Winters, watching Jack from a distance while he protected her from a life she'd already chosen? The answer came clear as spring water. Absolutely not. The next morning brought news. Agnes Moore arrived at breakfast, driving her wagon hard. Her usual composed demeanor was shattered. They burned my barn, she announced. Every scrap of hay, 2 milk cows, and a good saddle, all gone. When? Hank demanded. Last night, my hired man tried to fight it, but they beat him senseless. He'll live, but... She accepted coffee with shaking hands. They left a message. Said this was just the start, unless I convince you folks to drop the counterclaim. Crane's getting bolder, one of the hands muttered. Or more desperate, Jack said, speaking up for the first time in days. The hearing's in 10 days. He knows that map could ruin him. We should post guards, Hank decided, and move the women to town. No, Eliza and Agnes spoke in unison. I didn't come west to run at the first sign of trouble. Agnes continued. My Albert would spin in his grave. And I have work to do, Eliza added. These men need feeding, and I won't do it from town. The argument that followed was heated but brief. In the end, practicality won. They couldn't spare men to escort the women back and forth daily, and the ranch needed its cook. That afternoon, Eliza was hanging laundry when she heard horses approaching fast. She grabbed the Henry rifle, heart pounding, then relaxed as she recognized Toby riding hard with someone slumped across his saddle. Miss Eliza need help. The injured man was a stranger, Mexican by his features, with a nasty gash across his scalp. They got him inside, onto her table. While Toby ran for clean water, the man's eyes fluttered open. Easy, Eliza said. You're safe. No, safe. His English was accented but clear. Must warn Crane. What about Crane? Not just water, railroad. Coming through, secret deal, worth millions. We know about the railroad, Eliza said, cleaning his wound. No, you don't. He gripped her wrist with surprising strength. They need Coyote Spring. Only reliable water for 50 miles. Without it, railroad goes, different route, Crane, loses everything. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't just about controlling local water. It was about controlling the railroad's path, and with it, the future of the entire region. Who are you? She asked. Miguel Santana, work for survey crew. Crane tried to buy me. When I refused, he gestured weakly at his injury. Why warn us? Crane killed. My brother said it was accident, but I know. His eyes hardened. You stop him. I help. Jack arrived then, taking in the scene with quick assessment. His expression tightened when Eliza explained, but he questioned Miguel carefully, drawing out details about survey routes, water table depths, and political connections Crane had cultivated. He's telling the truth, Jack concluded. Explains why Crane's pushing so hard now. Railroad announcement must be soon. Very soon, Miguel confirmed. 2 weeks after your hearing. They exchanged grim looks. The hearing would decide water rights just days before the railroad made its choice. No wonder Crane was growing desperate. That evening, Eliza found Jack at the corral, watching the sunset. She approached carefully, like he was an unbroken horse. We need more help, she said. The other ranchers already sent word. Meeting tomorrow at the Moore place. I want to come. He turned to her then, and she saw the battle in his eyes. Eliza, I'm part of this now. Like it or not. She stepped closer. You can't protect me by pushing me away. Jack, that just leaves us both alone when trouble comes. You don't understand. His voice was rough. Tom Garrett had a woman. Mary, sweet thing, tough as nails. After Tom died in that stampede, she blamed me. Said I should have controlled the herd better. Seen the danger coming. She was right. She was grieving. She was right, he repeated. I was trail boss. My job to keep everyone safe. I failed. He looked at her fully then. I won't fail again, not with you. What if I don't want to be kept safe? She moved closer still, until she could feel the heat from his body. What if I want to stand beside you, share the danger? What if that's my choice? Then you're a fool. Maybe. But I'm a fool who can ride, shoot, and saved your life once already. She touched his arm. Stop protecting me from living. Jack, it's not your decision to make. He caught her hand, held it against his arm. For a moment, she thought he might pull her closer. Then he stepped back, releasing her. After the hearing, he said quietly, when this is settled and Crane's dealt with, then we'll talk about choices. It was more than she'd hoped for. I'll hold you to that. I know you will. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're about the stubbornest woman I've met. Second only to Agnes Moore. It's a close race. They stood together as darkness fell. Not touching, but somehow connected. Tomorrow would bring meetings, plans, probably more violence. But for now, they had a fragile understanding, a promise of future conversations, and the vast Wyoming sky stretching endlessly above. Miguel Santana proved a valuable ally. Hidden in the bunkhouse, he drew detailed maps of the proposed railroad routes, showing how Coyote Springs sat at the crucial junction. Without it, the railroad would have to swing 50 miles north, through Granite Pass, expensive, dangerous, and, coincidentally, through land Crane didn't control. He's invested everything, Miguel explained at the ranchers' meeting. Borrowed heavy from eastern banks, promised them railroad profits. If he loses the water, he loses it all. Agnes Moore finished with grim satisfaction. The assembled ranchers' running star, the Moores, the Bensons, and 3 smaller spreads agreed to stand together. They would pool resources for guards, share information, and present a united front at the hearing. "Crane won't back down easy," warned Bill Benson, still mourning his men lost to rustlers. "Man like that, backed into a corner, he'll come out swinging." "Then we'd better be ready to swing back," Hank replied. The meeting broke up with renewed determination. As Eliza climbed into the wagon, she noticed Jack talking intently with Miguel. The Mexican was gesturing northward, toward the mountains. Jack's expression grew increasingly grim. "What is it?" she asked when Jack returned. "Miguel knows where Crane's been gathering his hired guns. Hidden Canyon, about 10 miles north." He helped her onto the wagon seat. 20 men, maybe more. Too many for us to take straight on. "So what do we do?" "We get smart, and we pray the law's enough." But Eliza could see the doubt in his eyes. The law was only as strong as those willing to enforce it. And out here, enforcement came at the end of a gun. The ride back was quiet, each lost in thought. As they neared Running Star, Jack suddenly pulled up. "Dust," he said, pointing east. "Riders coming fast." They waited, tense, until the riders resolved into Deputy Pike and 2 men wearing federal marshal badges. "Gentlemen," Pike greeted them. "Ladies, like you to meet Marshals Garrett and Stone. They've come about our Crane problem." "Federal interest in a water dispute?" Hank asked suspiciously. "Federal interest in mail fraud, interstate banking violations, and conspiracy," Marshal Garrett corrected. He was an older man with eyes that had seen too much. "Seems Mr. Crane's been making promises he can't keep to some very unhappy investors back east." Hope flickered. Federal involvement changed everything. Crane might own local officials, but federal marshals were a different breed. "We'll need evidence," Marshal Stone added. He was younger, eager. "Documents, witnesses, everything you've got." "We've got a witness," Jack said. "Hidden at the ranch. Former surveyor who can testify about Crane's schemes." "Then we'd best get to him before Crane does." They made it back to find the ranch on alert. Toby had spotted riders in the distance, watching. The federal presence seemed to discourage immediate action, but everyone knew it was temporary. That night, Eliza couldn't settle. She paced her small cabin, rifle close at hand. The walls felt thin as paper, inadequate protection against what was coming. When a soft knock came, she nearly fired through the door. "It's me," Jack's voice. She let him in, noting his own restlessness. "Can't sleep either. Storm's coming. Can feel it in my bones." He moved to the window, scanning the darkness. "Garrett wants to move you and Agnes to town tomorrow. Federal protection." And I think he's right. "Dag, hear me out." He turned to her. "This isn't about keeping you safe from living. This is about keeping you alive for the living that comes after. There's a difference." She considered this. "How long?" "Few days, until after the hearing. Marshals plan to arrest Crane there, with all the evidence presented public-like. Harder for him to wiggle free." "And you?" "I'll be there too, testifying." He paused. "Would mean something, knowing you're safe while I do it." Put that way, she could see the sense. "All right, but only until the hearing." "Deal." He moved toward the door. Paused. "Eliza, what you said earlier, about choices, you were right. I've been so busy trying to protect you, I forgot you're already protecting yourself, and doing a fine job of it." Before she could respond, he was gone, but his words lingered, warming her more than the stove. The next morning came too soon. Eliza packed quickly, supervised by an impatient Marshal Stone. The men tried to act normal, but she could see their worry. Toby hugged her impulsively. "You come back soon, Miss Eliza. Your biscuits are way better than Hank's." "Hey," Hank protested, but he was smiling. Take care, girl. This'll all be over soon. Jack stood by the wagon, helping her up one last time. His hands lingered on hers. After the hearing, he said quietly, "We'll talk about those choices." "I'll hold you to that. Jack Calloway." "I'm counting on it." As the wagon rolled away, Eliza looked back. Jack stood watching until they rounded the bend, a lone figure against the vast sky. She pressed her hand to her heart, feeling the ache of separation already. But he was right. This was the smart play, the careful move. And in 10 days, at the hearing, justice would be served and they could stop running from shadows. She told herself that all the way to town, even as storm clouds gathered on the horizon and the wind carried the scent of rain and trouble. 10 days. Then they could talk about choices, about the future, about the feelings neither could deny. 10 days. It seemed like a lifetime. The drought arrived like an unwelcome relative, sudden, oppressive, and showing no signs of leaving. What should have been spring rains became dust devils dancing across cracked earth. Eliza watched from her window at May's boarding house as ranchers rode into town, faces grim beneath layers of alkali dust. "Never seen it this bad this early," May said, joining her at the window. "Usually we get until July before the real heat hits." It had been 3 days since Eliza arrived in town under federal protection. 3 days of pacing, of starting at every horse passing by, of wondering what was happening at Running Star. The marshals had restricted communication, too dangerous. They said anyone riding between town and the ranches could be followed, ambushed. "Any word from the ranches?" Eliza asked for the 100th time. "Deputy Pike brought news this morning. Wells are dropping fast, Coyote Springs still flowing, but—" May hesitated. "There was trouble last night." Eliza's heart clenched. "What kind of trouble?" "Fire at the hay storage. They saved most of it, but—" May's expression was grave. "It weren't no accident. Guards saw riders heading toward Crane's land after—" The need to return, to help, burned in Eliza's chest. But Marshal Garrett had been clear she was a key witness, and witnesses needed to stay alive until the hearing. Still 5 days away. 5 days while Running Star struggled without their cook, while Jack faced danger without her watching his back. That afternoon brought unexpected visitors. Agnes Moore arrived with Benny Two Feathers, both looking trail-worn. Agnes hugged Eliza fiercely. "Couldn't stand another day of town living," Agnes declared. "Federal protection or no, I'm going back tomorrow. My horses need tending." "The marshals won't like that," Eliza warned. "The marshals can go hang. Begging your pardon. Benny—" The blacksmith smiled. "No offense taken. I'm heading back too. Folks need horseshoes whether there's drought or danger." They shared supper in May's kitchen, the women cooking together like old times. Agnes brought news from the ranches, water rationing, cattle growing gaunt, tensions rising like the heat. "Jack asked after you," Agnes mentioned casually, watching Eliza's reaction. "Man's been working himself to the bone, up before dawn, riding the boundaries, checking the spring. Hank says he barely sleeps." "He's always been dedicated," Eliza said, keeping her voice neutral. "Dedicated," Agnes snorted. "That what we're calling it, girl? That man's pining. Even Toby noticed, and that boy wouldn't notice a stampede until it ran him over." Heat rose in Eliza's cheeks that had nothing to do with the stove. "He made it clear we're to wait until after the hearing to discuss anything." "Men and their timing," May interjected. "My late husband proposed during a tornado. Said if we were going to die, might as well die engaged." Despite everything, Eliza laughed. It felt good, a release of the tension she'd carried for days. That night, she lay awake thinking of Jack working himself to exhaustion. Was he punishing himself for sending her away, or just trying to stay busy enough not to think? She understood the impulse her own hands ached for work, for the familiar rhythm of feeding hungry men, of being useful. The next morning brought the worst news yet. Deputy Pike arrived dust-covered and grim. The smaller streams were failing. 3 ranches had already lost cattle. and Crane had posted armed guards at Coyote Spring, claiming protective custody until the courts decided ownership. "It's not legal," Pike said, accepting coffee from May. "But my authority only goes so far, until the federal boys move." "When will that be?" Eliza demanded. "At the hearing. They want Crane confident, all his cards on the table." Pike's expression softened. "I know it's hard, waiting, but justice takes time." "Justice takes too much time," Agnes said sharply. She'd loaded her wagon despite protests. "Eliza, you coming or staying?" The temptation was overwhelming. To return, to stand with her people because that's what they'd become. Her people. But Eliza forced herself to think strategically. Her testimony about the forged letter, about witnessing the survey stakes, could help nail Crane in court. "Staying," she said heavily. "For now." Agnes squeezed her shoulder. "I'll tell Jack you're well. Try to talk some sense into him about eating and sleeping." After Agnes left, Eliza threw herself into helping May run the boarding house. It wasn't the same as ranch cooking, but it kept her hands busy. The townspeople, aware of her situation, offered quiet support. Mrs. Abernathy from the general store slipped her peppermint sticks for when you get back to those cowboys. Dr. Holcomb stopped by to check on her, claiming he was just passing through. But the news from the ranches grew worse. On the 4th day, Toby arrived in town. The boy was sunburned and hollow-eyed, his usual cheer extinguished. "Miss Eliza," he nearly fell off his horse in his haste. "You gotta come back. It's Jack." Ice flooded her veins. "What happened?" "The hands were moving cattle to the last waterhole. Herd spook drought makes them crazy. Jack—" Toby's voice cracked. "He went down. Got the others clear, but the cattle—" Eliza was already moving, grabbing her things. Federal protection be damned. "He's alive." Toby continued quickly. "But hurt bad. Broke some ribs. Maybe worse. Won't let Doc Holcomb look at him proper. Says he's fine, but—" "Saddle a horse," Eliza ordered. "We're leaving now." Marshal Garrett intercepted them at the livery stable. "Miss Hart, I can't allow." "Then arrest me." She faced him squarely. "But I'm going—" Something in her expression must have convinced him. "Stone, go with them." He ordered his partner, "And ma'am, try not to get killed. We need your testimony." The ride to Running Star was the longest of Eliza's life. Every mile seemed to stretch endlessly, every moment wasted. She pushed Buttercup harder than ever before, the mare responding to her urgency. They found chaos at the ranch. Half the hands were still out with the cattle, the others milled around helplessly. Through it all, Hank's voice bellowed from the main house. "Damn it, Jack, let the doc help you." "I said I'm fine." Eliza burst through the door to find Jack slumped in a chair, left arm cradled against his chest, blood seeping through a makeshift bandage around his head. Dr. Holcomb stood nearby, bag in hand, clearly frustrated. "You're not fine," Eliza said quietly. Jack's head snapped up. Then he winced at the movement. "Eliza, what are you—" "You're supposed to be in town." "And you're supposed to have more sense than to fight a stampede alone?" She moved to him, noting how he tracked her movement despite the pain. "Doctor, what's the damage?" "If he'd let me examine him." "He'll let you now," Eliza said firmly. She knelt beside Jack's chair, taking his good hand. "Won't you?" Their eyes met. She saw the pain he'd been hiding, the exhaustion, the relief at her presence he couldn't quite conceal. "Eliza," he said roughly, "you shouldn't have come. It's too dangerous." "Stop protecting me and let me protect you for once." She squeezed his hand. "Please, Jack, for me." The fight went out of him. He nodded wearily, and Dr. Holcomb moved in. The examination revealed 3 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder, and a gash on his scalp that needed stitches. "You're lucky," the doctors said, working efficiently. "Few inches different, and we'd be having a different conversation. While the doctor worked, Jack kept his eyes on Eliza. She held his hand through the painful shoulder reset, felt him tremble as the doctor stitched his scalp. When it was done, Jack was pale and sweating, but whole. "He needs rest," Dr. Holcomb instructed. "Real rest, not whatever cowboys consider rest. No riding for a week, minimum." After the doctor left, Eliza helped Jack to his room in the main house. She'd never been in his private space before. It was sparse but clean, with one surprising touch: a shelf of books, mostly poetry and agricultural journals. "You read poetry?" she asked, helping him settle on the bed. "Man's got to have some culture." He caught her hand as she turned to leave. "Why did you come back?" "You know why." "Eliza." "No." She sat on the edge of the bed, their hands still linked. "No more pushing me away. No more noble sacrifice. You almost died today." "Part of the life out here." "Yes, it is, and I choose this life." She touched his face gently, mindful of his injuries. "I choose you, Jack Calloway, if you'll have me." He closed his eyes, leaning into her touch. "You deserve better than a broken-down cowboy who can't even handle a spooked herd. I deserve a man who risks himself to save others, who teaches with patience and protects with wisdom, who kisses me once and then tortures us both with waiting." She smiled through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "That sound like anyone you know?" "Eliza," his voice was raw, "I can't promise you safe, can't promise easy. I'm not asking for safe or easy. I'm asking for you." He pulled her down carefully, mindful of his ribs. The kiss was different from their first, deeper, carrying weeks of longing and fear and hope. When they parted, both were breathless. "After the hearing," he said, but now it sounded like a promise instead of a deflection. "We'll make it official, proper courtship, everything right." "I'll hold you to that." She stayed with him until he slept, then returned to her duties. The ranch needed feeding, injured or not. In the kitchen, she found unexpected help. Several townswomen had arrived, bringing supplies and willing hands. Even May was there, sleeves rolled up. "Federal protection includes the right to help neighbors," May said firmly when Eliza expressed surprise. "Now, show me where things are. These boys need feeding." They worked through the afternoon, a makeshift army of women keeping the ranch running. As evening approached, riders appeared on the horizon, the hands returning with what cattle they'd saved. Hank looked ready to drop. "Lost 30 head, he reported wearily. "Could have been worse without Jack. He turned them before they hit the Box Canyon. Saved most of the herd and all the men." "At a cost," Eliza said. "Yeah." Hank's expression was grim. "And with him laid up, we're short-handed for what's coming." "What's coming?" "Crane. Word is he's planning something big before the hearing. One last push to break us." That night, Eliza took a plate to Jack, finding him awake and restless. She helped him sit up, noting his frustrated growl at needing assistance. "I should be out there," he said, watching through the window as men set up guard posts. "You should be healing." She adjusted his pillows. "The men can handle one night without you." "It's not just one night." He caught her hand. "Storm's coming. Real storm, not just drought. Can feel it in the pressure. When it breaks, we'll handle it." She squeezed his fingers. "Together." He studied her face. "You've changed. When you first came here, you were scared of your own shadow." "I was scared of more than shadows." She thought back to that girl who'd stepped off the train, terrified of touch, of trust, of the vastness of the West. "This place changes people. You changed me." "No," he said softly. "You changed yourself. I just held the reins while you learned to ride." Thunder rumbled in the distance, so faint it might have been imagination, but the horses in the corral stirred uneasily, and the wind carried the metallic scent of approaching rain. "I should check the windows," Eliza said, but Jack held her fast. Stay, just a bit longer. She couldn't refuse him anything when he looked at her like that. She sat beside him as darkness fell, their hands entwined, watching the sky for signs of the storm everyone could feel building. It came near midnight. Not rain at first, but wind howling down from the mountains like a living thing. It rattled windows, sent loose items flying, and brought the scent of smoke. "Fire!" someone shouted. "The hay barn!" Eliza ran outside to see flames licking at their winter feed storage. Men were already forming bucket brigades, but the wind fed the fire faster than water could douse it. "Cut it loose!" Hank shouted. "Save what we can!" They worked desperately, pulling unburned hay away from the flames. The wind shifted, sending sparks toward the main barn. If that caught, they'd lose everything: horses, equipment, hope. Jack appeared, shoulder roughly bandaged, grabbing a bucket with his good arm. "Jack, no!" Eliza shouted, but he was already moving. That's when she saw them riders silhouetted against the flames, watching from the ridge. Crane's men, come to witness their handiwork. Rage flooded through her. While good men risked their lives fighting fire, those responsible sat back and watched. She grabbed the Henry rifle, took aim at the nearest rider. Her shot cracked through the night, sending the man's hat flying. The riders scattered, but the message was clear. Running Star wouldn't burn quietly. The firefight continued for hours. When the rain finally came, it was a deluge, drenching everyone but helping quell the last flames. They'd lost half the hay barn and a quarter of their winter feed, but the main structure stood. As dawn broke gray and wet, they surveyed the damage. Jack swayed on his feet, face gray with pain and exhaustion. Without a word, Eliza moved to his side, taking his weight. "Let's get you inside before you fall down, you stubborn fool." "Takes one to know one," he mumbled, but let her lead him away. She got him back to bed, redressed his wounds that had opened during the night's work. He caught her hand as she finished. "That was a hell of a shot. Remind me not to make you angry." "Too late. I'm furious." She sat heavily, exhaustion hitting all at once. "How much more can we take?" "As much as we have to." He pulled her closer until her head rested on his good shoulder. "Hearings in 2 days. We just have to last 2 more days. And then we stop surviving and start living." She closed her eyes, listening to his heartbeat. Outside, rain drummed on the roof. The drought broken but bringing new challenges. The hay shortage would make the coming winter brutal. Crane would strike again before the hearing. Jack was hurt, the men exhausted, their resources stretched thin. But they were still here, still fighting, still together. 2 more days, she repeated, making it a vow. 2 more days, Jack agreed, pressing a kiss to her hair. Thunder rolled across the plains, and Eliza thought of the storms yet to come, natural and man-made both. But with Jack's arms around her and the ranch family ready to stand together, she found hope. The virgin who'd come west just for work had found so much more courage she didn't know she possessed. A family forged in hardship, and a love worth fighting for. Now she just had to survive long enough to claim it all. 2 more days. In the West, lifetimes could change in less. The afternoon sun painted the ranch yard gold as Eliza walked beside Jack toward the corral. His ribs had healed enough for light activity, though she still caught him wincing when he thought she wasn't looking. The hearing was tomorrow, and tension hung over Running Star like smoke from the burned hay barn. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked as he gathered a lasso. "Been doing this since before I could properly walk," he said. But his smile held mischief. "Though teaching, it's another matter, especially to someone as stubborn as you." "I learned from the best," she shot back, taking the rope he offered. The other hands had found excuses to be elsewhere, giving them privacy. Even Toby had made himself scarce, though Eliza suspected he was watching from the barn loft. "First thing," Jack said, moving behind her, "is forgetting everything you think you know about throwing." His hands covered hers on the rope, warm and calloused, after weeks of careful distance since the fire. The contact sent sparks through her skin. She felt his breath stir her hair as he adjusted her grip. "Rope's got its own mind," he murmured. "You don't force it, you guide it, like dancing." "I don't dance," she managed, very aware of his chest against her back. "Sure you do. Every time you work in that kitchen, finding rhythm with the stove and the seasons, this is the same." His hands guided hers through the motion. "Feel the weight of the loop." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "Now, together, draw back." They moved as one, his body teaching hers the ancient pattern. And release. The rope sailed out, wobbly but true, settling over the practice post. Eliza laughed in delight, turning in his arms. "I did it." "You did." He was looking at her with such warmth she forgot to breathe. "Eliza, I came west just for work," she said softly, echoing the words she'd thought so many times. "But your hands." She covered his hands with hers where they rested at her waist. "They've taught me so much more than riding and roping." "What have they taught you?" His voice was rough. "Patience. How to be strong without being harsh. How to hold on and when to let go." She reached up to touch his face. "They've taught me what love truly means, not some fairy tale. But this daily work, shared struggle, choosing each other again each morning." "Eliza." He drew her closer, and she saw her feelings reflected in his eyes, the longing, the fear, the hope. "You know there's no going back from this. What we have, what's growing between us, it changes everything. Everything's already changed." She thought of the frightened girl who'd stepped off the train, who'd flinched from touch and hid behind propriety. "I'm not that virgin who came west anymore." "Jack, that girl was so scared of her own body, of wanting things proper ladies shouldn't want." His hands tightened on her waist. "And now?" "Now I know that wanting your hands on me, your mouth on mine, doesn't make me improper. It makes me human. It makes me yours. If you'll have me." The sun was low, casting long shadows across the yard. Dust motes dancing in the golden light like tiny stars. Jack's expression held wonder and hunger in equal measure. "If I'll have you," he laughed, short and breathless. "Eliza Hart, I've been yours since the day you shot that man off his horse to save my life. Maybe before that, if I'm honest." She rose on her toes, bringing their faces level. "Then stop being noble and kiss me like you mean it." He did. This kiss was different from their others, deeper, hungrier, full of weeks of denied want. His hands tangled in her hair, and she pressed closer, feeling the solid warmth of him, the proof that they'd both survived to reach this moment. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, the world had shifted. The rope lay forgotten at their feet, and the evening sky blazed orange and pink above them. "After tomorrow," Jack said against her lips. "After the hearing, when Crane's dealt with and we're free." "I know," she smiled, feeling wild and free despite everything hanging over them. "Proper courtship, church wedding, all of it." "All of it," he agreed. Then, quieter, "I want to do right by you, Eliza. You deserve—" She silenced him with another kiss, shorter but no less sweet. "I deserve exactly what I choose, and I choose you, Jack Calloway, tomorrow and all the days after." They stood together as twilight gathered, his arms around her, her head on his shoulder. The burned hay barn stood stark against the sky, reminder of all they'd endured. But new wood already framed repairs, and green shoots pushed through the drought-cracked earth where the rain had fallen. "We should go in," Jack said eventually. "Early start tomorrow." But neither moved. This moment felt stolen from time, too precious to release. Tomorrow would bring the hearing, confrontation with Crane, testimony that could save or damn them all. But right now, they had the weight of rope in her hands, the memory of his hands teaching hers, the promise of a future they'd build together. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the lesson. For all of them. She looked up at him. For teaching me to trust these hands. She lifted her own hands, studying them scarred now from work, strong from labor, capable of so much more than she'd ever dreamed. For showing me that strength isn't about standing alone. You taught me that too. He admitted. I'd gotten so used to keeping people at arm's length, protecting them by pushing them away. You wouldn't let me. Too stubborn, she agreed, making him laugh. Best quality in a ranch woman. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Come on, let's get some supper before Hank sends out a search party. They walked back hand in hand, no longer hiding what was between them. In the kitchen, the men pretended not to notice their linked fingers, but Eliza caught Toby passing coins to Hank. Apparently there'd been a bet on when they'd finally admit their feelings. About time, Agnes Moore said, arriving with Deputy Pike for a pre-hearing strategy meeting. Thought I'd die of old age waiting for you two to see sense. The evening was spent in preparation. Miguel Santana, recovered from his injuries, would testify about Crane's railroad schemes. Agnes had her grandfather-in-law's original survey map. Eliza would speak to the forged letter and witnessed stakes. Other ranchers would attest to harassment and sabotage. It's a strong case, Marshal Garrett assured them. Crane's going to find himself facing federal charges along with the water rights issue. If he shows up, Deputy Pike said darkly. Word is he's been moving men and supplies. Might run rather than face justice. He'll show, Jack said with certainty. Man like Crane can't admit defeat. He'll come to that hearing thinking he can still buy or bully his way out. Let's hope you're right, Garrett said. Easier to arrest him in a courtroom than chase him across the territory. After the others left, Eliza found herself alone with Jack on the porch. The night was clear, stars bright as scattered flour across black velvet. Somewhere in the darkness, coyotes sang their ancient song. Scared, Jack asked. Terrified, she admitted. Not of testifying, of what Crane might do when he's cornered. We'll be ready. He pulled her close. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, she agreed, sealing it with a kiss that tasted of promises and gunpowder, of hope and dust, of all the tomorrows they'd fight to see. That night, Eliza lay in her narrow bed thinking of the journey that had brought her here. The forged letter had been meant as a trap, but it had led her to purpose, to family, to love. Tomorrow's hearing would determine water rights and land claims. But for her, the important verdicts had already been rendered. She was no longer the frightened girl fleeing poverty, clinging to propriety like armor. The West had burned that away, leaving someone stronger, someone who could face down gunmen and drought and still find joy in simple things. Jack's rare smile, Toby's enthusiasm, Agnes's tart wisdom, the satisfaction of feeding hungry men who'd worked honest labor. Her hands bore the proof of transformation scars from cooking burns, calluses from reins and rifles, the memory of Jack's hands teaching hers to throw a lasso. These hands had learned to create and defend, to heal and, when necessary, to harm in protection of what mattered. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. But tonight, she had the knowledge that she was loved, that she belonged, that she'd found her place under the vast western sky. The Virgin had indeed come west just for work, but the woman who'd emerged from that crucible had found so much more, as sleep finally claimed her. Eliza smiled, thinking of Jack's hands guiding hers, of the rope sailing true, of all the lessons yet to learn. Tomorrow, they'd fight for their water, their land, their future. Tonight, she held the memory of golden afternoon light in patient hands, and the words that had changed everything. I choose you. In the morning, dressed in her best dress, mended but clean, Eliza stood before her small mirror. The woman looking back was a stranger, and yet utterly familiar, sun-touched skin, steady eyes, hands that knew their own strength. Ready? Jack asked from her doorway. Dressed in his own town clothes, but wearing his gun. Ready? She said, taking the hand he offered. As they walked to the wagon where the others waited, Eliza felt the weight of the coming day, but also its promise. Whatever happened at the hearing, she'd already won the only verdict that truly mattered: the choice to love and be loved, to stay and fight rather than run, to build something lasting in this harsh and beautiful land. The virgin who'd gone west for work had found her true calling, and it had nothing to do with cooking or sewing. It had to do with courage and commitment, with choosing hope over fear, with learning that the strongest bonds were forged not in ease, but in hardship shared and overcome. As the wagon rolled toward town and whatever justice awaited, Eliza held tight to Jack's hand and to the truth she'd discovered: sometimes the greatest adventures began not with grand gestures, but with small moments of teaching and learning, with patient hands and willing hearts, with a simple choice to say yes to whatever tomorrow might bring. The sun rose full and bright, burning away the morning mist. It would be a hot day in more ways than one, but Eliza faced it without fear, her hand in Jack's, her heart full of the love his patient teaching had helped her find the courage to claim. The hearing awaited. Justice beckoned, and whatever came next, they would meet it together, two souls who'd found each other in the vast western wilderness and chosen to make their stand on the banks of a disputed spring, fighting for water and land and the right to love freely under the endless sky. The courthouse in Dry Willow had never seen such a crowd. Ranchers, townspeople, and curious observers packed the small building until it seemed the walls might burst. Eliza sat in the front row between Jack and Agnes Moore, her hands folded to hide their trembling. Across the aisle, Silas Crane lounged like a satisfied cat, flanked by two lawyers in city suits. Judge Mortimer, a stern man with silver whiskers, called the room to order. "We're here to determine the rightful water claims to Coyote Spring. This is a civil matter, though I understand federal marshals are present for other concerns." Marshals Garrett and Stone stood at the back, badges prominent. Crane's confidence flickered slightly at their presence. The hearing began with Crane's lawyers presenting their case: smooth words about surveying errors, natural changes in water flow, and the need for modernization of old claims. They produced documents, all properly stamped and official-looking. The original markers were placed incorrectly. The lead lawyer insisted. "Mr. Crane is simply correcting a 20-year-old mistake." Then came the counter-testimony. Agnes Moore took the stand first, her grandfather-in-law's map clutched like a weapon. "That's absolute hogwash," she declared, causing Judge Mortimer to hide a smile. "Samuel Hart surveyed this land in 1867, and he was the best surveyor in the territory. That spring has belonged to Running Star since before Crane could spell his own name." She spread the map carefully, pointing out landmarks still visible today. The detail was impressive: every creek, every notable rock formation, every stand of trees carefully recorded. Crane's lawyers tried to discredit the map as outdated, but Agnes held firm. "Land doesn't lie. Young man, that split cottonwood is still there, right where Samuel marked it. 40 paces due north, you'll find the original marker stone, just like he wrote." Deputy Pike testified next about the harassment cut fences, poisoned water, the burned hay barn. She'd kept meticulous records, dates and damages all properly documented. "And you witnessed these incidents?" Judge Mortimer asked. "Witnessed the aftermath. Your Honor, the perpetrators were remarkably good at not being caught in the act." "Circumstantial." Crane's lawyer dismissed. "No proof connecting my client to these alleged crimes." Then Miguel Santana took the stand. The former surveyor's testimony was damning. He explained the railroad's planned route, the necessity of Coyote Spring for the water station, and Crane's attempts to bribe him. "He offered me $1,000 to adjust the survey lines," Miguel said clearly. "When I refused, he had his men beat me and leave me for dead." "Lies," Crane burst out. "This man's a drunk and a thief." "Mr. Crane, you'll have your chance to respond," Judge Mortimer warned. Finally, it was Eliza's turn. Her legs shook as she approached the witness chair, but Jack's encouraging nod steadied her. She told her story simply: the forged letter, arriving to find no job waiting, May's kindness in taking her in. "And you're certain the letter was forged?" the judge asked. Mrs. O'Rourke confirmed it immediately. Someone used her stationery and name to lure desperate workers west. She met Crane's eyes steadily. "I wonder who would benefit from a surplus of cheap labor." "Objection," Crane's lawyer stood. "Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said, but Eliza had made her point. She continued with her testimony about the survey stakes, the attempts to intimidate Running Star, the night riders after the Moore Ranch visit. Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, the truth of her words evident. Crane's lawyer tried to paint her as a hysterical woman, prone to exaggeration. "Miss Hart, isn't it true you've been involved with Jack Calloway? Might that not cloud your judgment?" Heat flooded her cheeks, but she lifted her chin. "Mr. Calloway and I have an understanding. Yes, but I've testified to what I've seen with my own eyes. My feelings don't change facts." "An understanding?" The lawyer smirked. "How convenient. Tell me, Miss Hart, what exactly did you hope to gain by coming west?" "Work," she said simply. "Honest work to support my family. And instead you found a wealthy rancher to understand you." Jack started to rise, but Eliza's steady voice stopped him. "I found a community of decent people trying to survive against men who think money gives them the right to steal. If that makes me biased, so be it." The judge dismissed her, and she returned to her seat on unsteady legs. Jack's hand found hers, squeezing gently. The noon recess was called in the courthouse yard. The Running Star group clustered together while Crane held court with his supporters. "You did good," Jack murmured to Eliza. "Real good." "He's not done yet," Hank warned, watching Crane's animated discussion with his lawyers. He was right. When court resumed, Crane took the stand himself. He was a masterful liar. Eliza had to admit, he painted himself as a progressive businessman trying to bring prosperity to the region, thwarted by backwards ranchers clinging to outdated claims. "The railroad will transform this territory," he declared, "but it needs water. Coyote Spring could serve the entire county if properly managed, not hoarded by one ranch." "And you'd be the proper manager?" Judge Mortimer asked dryly. "I have the resources and vision, yes." But then the federal marshals made their move. Marshal Garrett stepped forward. "Your Honor, if I might introduce federal evidence." Crane went pale as Garrett produced telegraph records, bank documents, and sworn statements from Eastern investors. The scope of Crane's fraud became clear. He'd sold the same water rights to multiple parties, promised railroad shares that didn't exist, taken loans against land he didn't own. "Furthermore," Garrett continued, "we have evidence of interstate mail fraud, specifically the forged letters used to lure workers west under false pretenses." The courtroom erupted. Crane's supporters melted away like snow in spring. His lawyers huddled, whispering frantically. Judge Mortimer gavelled for order. "Mr. Crane, do you have any response to these federal charges?" That is..." For the first time, Crane seemed at a loss. Then his expression hardened. "This is a conspiracy. These people are trying to destroy me because I threaten their stranglehold on progress." "The only thing you threaten is the law," Judge Mortimer said coldly. "Based on the evidence presented, I find in favor of Running Star Ranch's original claim to Coyote Spring. All surveying markers placed by Mr. Crane are to be removed immediately." He turned to the federal marshals. "Gentlemen, I believe you have business with Mr. Crane. Silas Crane, you're under arrest for mail fraud, interstate banking violations, and conspiracy," Marshal Garrett announced, moving forward with handcuffs. That's when chaos erupted. Crane lunged for the door, bowling over his lawyers. His men, stationed outside, burst in with drawn weapons. Women screamed. Men dove for cover. In the melee, Crane broke free, heading for the back exit. Eliza saw him going for the door near their group. Without thinking, she stuck out her foot. Crane went sprawling, his gun skittering across the floor. Jack was on him instantly, pinning him down while Marshal Stone secured the cuffs. Nice footwork. Jack grinned at her as order was restored. I learned from the best, she replied, still breathless from the sudden action. With Crane arrested and his men disarmed, the courtroom slowly settled. Judge Mortimer, who'd taken shelter behind his bench, emerged with admirable dignity. "Well," he said, straightening his robes, "I believe my ruling stands. Court dismissed, and everyone please exit in an orderly fashion. Except you, Mr. Crane. You'll be staying with the marshals." Outside, the Running Star contingent gathered in a mix of exhaustion and elation. They'd won, the water was theirs. Crane was finished. The ranch was saved. "Drinks are on me at May's," Hank announced, and a cheer went up. But as they started toward the boarding house, shots rang out. Two of Crane's men, ones who'd escaped the courthouse, opened fire from the alley. People scattered, screaming. Jack shoved Eliza behind a water trough as bullets peppered the ground around them. "Stay down," he ordered, drawing his gun. The gunfight was brief but vicious. Deputy Pike and the federal marshals returned fire, joined by several townsmen. When the smoke cleared, one attacker was dead, the other wounded and captured. "Anyone hit?" Pike called out. "Here," Agnes's voice, high and frightened. "It's Benny." They found the blacksmith bleeding from his shoulder, Agnes pressing her shawl to the wound. Dr. Holcomb appeared as if by magic, taking charge. "Clean through," he announced after a quick examination. "You're lucky. Benny, half an inch lower." "Feel real lucky," Benny gritted out, but he managed a smile for Agnes, who hadn't let go of his hand. They got him to the doctor's office, where the wound was properly treated. The celebration at May's was subdued but heartfelt. They'd won, but at a cost. Crane's poison would take time to fully cleanse from the county. As evening fell, Jack and Eliza found themselves on May's porch, watching the sun set over the town. Tomorrow they'd return to Running Star, to the hard work of rebuilding after drought and fire. But tonight, they had victory and each other. "You saved the day again," Jack said, tripping Crane like that. "Teamwork," she corrected. "That's what you taught me. No one stands alone out here." "No," he agreed, pulling her close. "They don't." Deputy Pike joined them, looking tired but satisfied. "Thought you'd want to know we rounded up the last of Crane's hired guns. Also, Judge Mortimer wants to see you both tomorrow before you leave town." "What for?" Jack asked suspiciously. Pike smiled. "Something about making your understanding official. Seems he's also a justice of the peace and figures you've waited long enough." Eliza's heart skipped. "You mean—" "If you're willing," Jack said, turning to her with hope and uncertainty in his eyes. "I know it's not the church wedding I promised, but—" "Yes?" she interrupted. "Yes to tonight, tomorrow, next week in church, whatever you want, just yes." He kissed her then, there on the porch with half the town watching, and nobody minded a bit. They'd earned this moment through fire and drought, bullets and courtrooms. "I'll tell the judge to expect you," Pike said, grinning as she left them to their embrace. That night, there was singing at May's old songs of love and loss, of cattle drives and lonely prairies, of hope that bloomed in unlikely places. Eliza sat with Jack's arm around her, surrounded by the family they'd built, and knew herself home at last. The virgin who'd come west for work had found so much more. Tomorrow she'd stand before Judge Mortimer and pledge herself to Jack Calloway, making official what their hearts had known for weeks. Then they'd return to Running Star to face whatever challenges came next winter. Rebuilding, the railroad's eventual arrival. But she'd face them as Eliza Calloway, with a partner whose patient hands had taught her to ride, to shoot, to love without fear. The lessons would continue. Marriage brought its own learning, but she welcomed them all. As the evening wound down and couples drifted away, Jack walked her to her room at May's one last time. Tomorrow night, she'd sleep at Running Star as his wife. The thought should have frightened the girl she'd been. Instead, it filled her with quiet joy. "No regrets?" Jack asked at her door. "It's been a wild road to get here." "The best roads usually are," she replied, pulling him down for one last unmarried kiss. When he left, she stood at her window watching the stars. Somewhere out there, Coyote Spring flowed clear and free, secured for Running Star and the future they'd build. The fight had been worth it, every moment of fear, every setback, every small victory. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but it would also bring new joys, new lessons, new reasons to be grateful for the forged letter that had brought her west. The virgin-seeking work had become a woman who'd found purpose, love, and the courage to fight for both. Under the vast Wyoming sky, anything was possible. Even happy endings earned with blood, sweat, and hope. Even love that grew from patient teaching and mutual trust. Even a future bright as water flowing free across thirsty land. The hearing was over. Justice, however imperfect, had been served. And in the morning, Eliza Hart would become Eliza Calloway, ready to face whatever the West might throw at them next. She smiled, touching the window glass. Somewhere, coyotes sang their ancient song, and, for the first time, it sounded like a welcome home. The first drops of rain hit the courthouse steps as Judge Mortimer pronounced them husband and wife. Eliza Calloway, the name still felt new and wonderful, laughed as Jack swept her up and spun her around, not caring that half of Dry Willow watched from windows and doorways. "Rain on a wedding day means good luck," May declared, hustling them toward her boarding house. "Though after the drought, any rain's lucky." The impromptu wedding breakfast at May's was simple but joyful. Agnes had somehow procured a cake. Benny, arm in a sling but spirits high, played his fiddle. And even Deputy Pike smiled more than usual. The federal marshals had departed with Crane in chains, but the shadow of recent events made the celebration feel more precious. Not less. To the new Mrs. Calloway. Hank raised his glass. "Who came west looking for work and found a whole lot more trouble than she bargained for?" "To trouble that ends well," Eliza countered, making everyone laugh. The rain intensified as they prepared to leave town, transforming from gentle drops to a steady downpour. The drought was truly broken, but it brought new challenges. The road to Running Star turned treacherous with mud, and they arrived at the ranch soaked and shivering. "Welcome home," Jack said, helping her down from the wagon. The words held new meaning now. This was truly her home, legally and emotionally. Over the following days, the rain continued. What had been cracked earth became saturated ground, then standing water. The irony wasn't lost on anyone after fighting for water rights. They now had more water than they could handle. Creeks rising fast. Toby reported at breakfast 3 days later. "Never seen it this high this quick." Jack and Hank exchanged worried looks. Flash floods were as dangerous as drought in this country. They organized crews to move the cattle to higher ground, reinforce the buildings, and dig drainage channels. Eliza threw herself into the work, cooking for the exhausted men, helping move supplies, learning yet another facet of ranch life. Her wedding dress, her only good dress, was packed away as she donned work clothes and boots. Not much of a honeymoon. Jack apologized one evening, both of them mud-splattered and exhausted. "We're together," she replied. "That's honeymoon enough." But she saw the frustration in his eyes. He'd wanted to do right by her, give her proper courting and romance. Instead, they were battling nature again, barely having time for more than quick kisses between crises. On the 5th day, the real test came. Miguel Santana, who'd stayed on as a hand, rode in at full gallop. "The spring!" he shouted. "The whole hillside's given way." They raced to Coyote Spring to find disaster brewing. The constant rain had saturated the slope above the spring. Ancient cottonwoods leaned at dangerous angles, and cracks appeared in the earth. If the hillside collapsed, it could bury the spring entirely, undoing everything they'd fought to preserve. We need to shore it up, Jack said, surveying the damage. Redirect the water flow before it undermines more. They worked through the day and into the night. Eliza helped fill sandbags until her hands bled, then bandaged others' wounds when they wouldn't stop for injury. Agnes Moore arrived with her crew. Then the Bensons, word spreading that Running Star needed help. Crater's men would be laughing, someone muttered as they fought the sliding earth. Let them laugh, Agnes shot back. We take care of our own. The battle against the mudslide became a community effort. Even townspeople arrived, Dr. Holcomb working alongside Cowboys, Mrs. Abernathy organizing food supplies, Deputy Pike directing traffic. The same unity that had faced down Crane now faced nature's fury. As dawn broke on the second day of struggle, a cry went up. The largest cottonwood was falling, its massive root system pulling up earth like a giant hand. It would hit the spring directly, potentially damming or destroying it. Ropes, Jack shouted. If we can control the fall. Men scrambled with lassos, trying to guide the tree's descent. Eliza watched her husband directing the effort, soaked to the skin but never faltering. This was what she'd married, not just a man, but a leader who others naturally followed. The tree fell with a crash that shook the ground, missing the spring by mere feet. A cheer went up. Premature as it turned out, the tree's fall had opened new cracks, and water began spurting from unexpected places. It's finding new channels, Miguel observed. The whole underground flow is shifting. This could be disaster or opportunity. Jack made a quick decision. We guide it, he announced. Instead of one spring, we create a series of pools, spread the pressure, reduce erosion. It was audacious, reshaping the landscape to work with nature instead of against it. They dug channels, placed rocks, created a cascading series of pools that distributed the water's force. Eliza found herself working beside Benny Two Feathers, learning to read the water's will. Your people did this for generations, she said as they placed stones. Land remembers. Benny replied, sometimes it just needs reminding of the old patterns. By the third day, the immediate crisis had passed. The spring now fed 3 pools, each flowing into the next, creating a more stable system than before. The community stood mud-caked and exhausted, but triumphant. It's actually better than it was, Agnes marveled. More water access points, less chance of single-point failure. Sometimes destruction leads to improvement, Jack said, pulling Eliza close. If you're willing to work with what is instead of mourning what was. That evening, the ranch held an impromptu celebration. Tables were set up in the yard, and everyone who'd helped was invited. It wasn't the wedding reception Jack had planned, but Eliza couldn't imagine anything better. These people had proved that community meant more than proximity. It meant showing up when needed. Dance with me, Jack requested as Benny's fiddle started a waltz. I'm covered in mud, she protested. So am I. Come on, Mrs. Calloway. Our first dance as husband and wife, even if it is a week late. They danced in the ranch yard, boots squelching in mud, while their neighbors clapped and cheered. It was perfect in its imperfection, honest in its joy. Later, as the party wound down, Toby approached with uncharacteristic shyness. Miss Eliza, Mrs. Calloway, I got something for you. He produced a small wrapped package. Wedding present. Wasn't ready before, but inside was a leather-bound journal, the cover tooled with a design of mountains and flowing water. Figured you might want to write things down, he mumbled. The recipes you're teaching folks, or whatever. Eliza hugged him, making him blush crimson. It's perfect. Toby, thank you. As guests departed, she and Jack walked to their cabin now, expanded with help from the hands to include a proper bedroom and small parlor. The rain had finally stopped, and stars peeked through breaking clouds. Not the wedding week I planned, Jack said as they stood on their porch. It was better, Eliza said firmly. We didn't just speak vows in front of a judge. We lived them for better or worse, in plenty and in want. The whole community witnessed what marriage really means. He studied her face in the starlight. How did I get lucky enough to find you? I think we found each other, she corrected. Two stubborn souls, too foolish to quit when things got hard. Inside, she lit the lamp and opened Toby's gift. On the first page, she wrote, "The rain came like a blessing and a curse, teaching us that abundance can be as challenging as scarcity. But we learned what Coyote Spring had been trying to tell us all along: water finds its way. And so does love. Sometimes you have to let both flow where they will, trusting that patient hands and willing hearts can guide without controlling." "Writing our story?" Jack asked, reading over her shoulder. "Someone should. Though I doubt anyone would believe it. A virgin goes west for work and ends up reshaping a spring and catching a cattle baron." "Former virgin," he corrected with a grin that made her blush. "And Crane was the would-be baron. I'm just a cowboy who got lucky." She turned in his arms. "The luckiest cowboy in Wyoming." "In the whole territory," he confirmed, and kissed her with all the passion a week of mud and crisis had delayed. The next morning brought sunshine and a letter from Timothy. Her brother's health was improving, and he was considering coming west himself when fully recovered. Eliza read it aloud at breakfast, her heart full at the thought of having her remaining family near. Always room for more hands, Hank said, especially with the railroad coming. The railroad they'd almost forgotten in the chaos of the flood. But with Coyote Spring secured and now improved, Running Star was positioned to benefit from the coming changes instead of being destroyed by them. "We should plan," Jack said. "Water contracts, grazing agreements. Do this right. We could supply beef to the railroad workers, water to the engines." "Look at you, thinking like a baron," Eliza teased. "Thinking like a man with a future to build," he corrected, taking her hand. They spent the morning making plans, practical dreams of expansion, improvement, community growth. The spring's transformation had shown them that change didn't have to mean loss. With careful guidance and communal effort, it could mean opportunity. That afternoon, Eliza stood at the new pools, watching water cascade from one to the next. The violent flood had become a gentle flow, each pool supporting the next, creating abundance where there had almost been disaster. Like her own journey, she thought. What had started as desperate flight from poverty had become a flowing series of connections, each person, each challenge leading to the next, creating something stronger than any single element. "Regrets?" Jack asked. "Joining her?" "Never," she said firmly. "Though I do wonder what that person who sent the forged letter would think if they could see how it turned out. Probably not what they expected." "Nothing's been what I expected," she admitted. "It's been harder and better and more than I ever imagined when I stepped on that train." He pulled her close, and they stood watching their spring, not just Running Stars, but the whole community's now, earned through shared struggle. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The railroad negotiations, winter preparations, the ongoing work of building a life together. But today was for gratitude, for rain that tested them and community that sustained them, for love that had grown from patient teaching and mutual courage, for the way water and hearts both found their proper channels when given patient guidance and room to flow. The virgin who'd come west for work had become a woman who helped reshape the land itself, and in doing so, had discovered that the greatest transformations came not from controlling nature or hearts, but from learning to work with both, trusting the flow while guiding it with gentle, capable hands. As they walked back to the ranch, Eliza noticed new growth already pushing through the mud grass seeds that had waited years for enough water. Now, seizing their moment, Running Star would be greener than ever come spring. "Like us," Jack said, following her gaze. "Just needed the right conditions to bloom." She laughed, linking her arm through his. "Careful. Cowboy, you're turning poetic on me. You're a bad influence, bringing books and fancy ideas out west." "Someone has to civilize you rough types," she replied. then shrieked with laughter as he swept her up and threatened to carry her through a mud puddle. "Civilized enough for you?" he asked, grinning down at her. "Perfect," she assured him. "Absolutely perfect." And it was not the perfection of fairy tales, but the real perfection of life lived fully messy, challenging, surprising, and worth every moment. The rain had ended. The spring flowed free in its new channels, and Eliza Calloway had found her place in the great rhythm of Western life. Tomorrow would bring its own tests, but she would meet them with muddy boots and capable hands, with a partner beside her and a community behind her, with the knowledge that some transformations came through fire, some through water, and the best through patient love. The virgin had gone west for work. The woman who remained had found her life's true labor building something lasting on the banks of a spring that had taught them all to flow with change while holding fast to what mattered most. The railroad representatives arrived on a crisp October morning, exactly 1 year after Eliza first stepped off the train in Dry Willow. She watched from the porch as 3 men in city suits climbed down from their fancy carriage, looking distinctly out of place against the ranch's weathered buildings. Mr. Calloway, the lead man, introducing himself as Harrison Wells, extended a soft hand that had never held a rope. "We're here to discuss the water rights agreement." Jack shook hands carefully, as if the man might break. "Welcome to Running Star. My wife has prepared refreshments inside." Eliza had indeed prepared not just food, but strategy. The dining table held fresh bread, preserves, and coffee, but also maps, water flow charts, and usage projections she'd spent weeks preparing. The railroad men might have expected to deal with simple cowboys. They'd learn otherwise. "Gentlemen," she greeted them, noting their surprise at being received by a woman in practical dress rather than parlor finery. "Please sit. We have much to discuss." The negotiations were delicate. The railroad needed water for their engines and the planned station, but Running Star needed guarantees fair payment, controlled access, protection of the spring's flow for ranch use. "We could simply purchase the land outright," Wells suggested, producing a number that would have stunned the girl who'd arrived with one carpetbag. "No," Jack and Eliza said in unison. "This land isn't just property," Jack explained. "It's home to 40 people, hundreds of cattle, and a community that depends on that water. We'll lease access, not sell." Eliza produced her charts. "Based on your projected traffic and our water flow data, we can support 2 water towers and a station while maintaining ranch operations and downstream users." Wells studied the papers, clearly impressed despite himself. "You compiled this." "My wife has a head for figures," Jack said proudly, "and an understanding of what this land needs." The negotiations continued through lunch. Eliza found herself leading much of the discussion, her months of keeping ranch books and learning water management serving her well. She thought of the frightened girl who'd once clutched a forged letter and marveled at the journey. "We propose a 50-year lease," she said finally. "Annual payments adjusted for inflation, water usage limits based on seasonal flow, and Running Star retains all rights not specifically granted." "That's actually quite reasonable," Wells admitted. "You've thought this through." "We've learned to plan ahead," Jack said dryly. "The West teaches hard lessons about preparation." They reached an agreement by evening fair to both sides, protecting the ranch while allowing progress. As the railroad men prepared to leave, Wells paused. "Mrs. Calloway, have you ever considered working for the railroad? We could use someone with your analytical skills." "Thank you, but no." Eliza smiled. "I came west for work, and I found it. My place is here." After they left, Jack swept her into a spinning hug. "You were magnificent. Did you see their faces when you pulled out those water table charts?" "Toby helped with the measurements," she laughed. "And Agnes checked my arithmetic." It was a community effort, as always. That evening, they called a ranch meeting to share the agreement. The lease payments would allow improvements, a new barn to replace the burned one, better housing for the hands, perhaps even a school for the growing number of children in the area. To Mrs. Calloway, Hank raised his cup, who came here as our cook and became our business manager. To all of us, Eliza corrected, for proving that courage and community can stand against any challenge. Later, as she and Jack walked to the spring in the moonlight, she reflected on the changes. The 3 pools they'd created during the flood still cascaded gently, but now they could envision pump houses, carefully designed to preserve the natural beauty while serving new needs. Any regrets about not taking that job offer? Jack asked. None, though it was nice to be asked. She leaned into his warmth. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else. They stood quietly, listening to the water's song. Tomorrow, Agnes would arrive to plan the school building. Benny had proposed and been accepted, so there'd be a wedding to prepare. Timothy's latest letter said he'd be arriving in spring, healthy at last and eager to try ranch life. The virgin who came west for work, Jack mused, echoing the thought she'd carried so long. Found more than she ever dreamed, Eliza finished, thanks to a patient teacher with gentle hands. He turned her to face him, his hands framing her face with that same gentleness that had taught her to trust. You taught me too, to stop pushing people away, to believe in a future worth building together. Then we're even, she said, rising on her toes to kiss him. The next months passed in a blur of construction and preparation. The railroad crews arrived, transforming the landscape with steel and steam, but Running Star adapted, thrived even. Eliza established contracts to supply beef to the workers, managed water distribution that kept all parties satisfied, and somehow still found time to cook for her extended ranch family. The school opened in December, built where the old hay storage had burned. Eliza taught arithmetic and writing 3 mornings a week, watching children who would grow up taking progress for granted while still understanding the land's harsh beauty. Spring brought Timothy, thin but healing, eyes wide at the vast spaces. Within a week, Toby had him writing. Within a month, he was talking about staying forever. Seeing her brother bloom in the western air filled a place in Eliza's heart she hadn't realized was empty. The wedding season brought unexpected joy, not just Benny and Agnes, but Deputy Pike and Dr. Holcomb, Toby and the schoolteacher's daughter who'd arrived to help at the school. Love, it seemed, was as contagious as courage in the right community. On a perfect June evening, Eliza stood where the first water tower now rose beside Coyote Spring. The railroad station bore a sign, Running Star Springs Station, acknowledgement of what this place had become. Passengers could debark, water their horses, rest at what had grown from a single ranch to a small but thriving community. You did this, Jack said, joining her. We did this, all of us. She gestured to the scene, Agnes teaching children to read under the cottonwoods, Benny working his forge near the station, Timothy helping Toby with the evening chores. We took what could have destroyed us and built something better. Like the spring, he agreed, guided but not controlled. That night, in their expanded cabin with its new rooms and proper parlor, Eliza wrote in her journal, The virgin came west for work, but found her life's true labor not just in cooking or figures, but in the daily choice to build rather than break, to trust rather than fear, to love rather than merely survive. The West strips away pretense, leaving only what's essential. In that revealing, I found myself. Jack read over her shoulder, arms wrapped around her, writing the ending. The beginning, she corrected. Everything else was prologue. Outside, a train whistle echoed across the plains, not a lonely sound but a connection, linking their remote corner to the wider world while leaving its essential character intact. The spring still flowed, now feeding not just cattle but dreams. The ranch still worked, now supporting not just cowboys but families. And in their cabin, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds held tight to what they'd built. The virgin had gone west for work, seeking survival. The woman who remained had found life itself rich, challenging, and worth every struggle. As Eliza closed her journal, she heard music from the bunkhouse. Toby's guitar joined by other instruments, voices raised in harmony. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Always did, but tonight was for gratitude, for dancing, for celebrating the extraordinary journey from desperate hope to rooted joy. "Come on," Jack said, pulling her to her feet. "Let's join them. Can't have a proper celebration without the woman who started it all." "I didn't start anything," she protested as he led her outside. "I just answered a forged letter." "And changed everything," he said simply. Under stars that had watched her transformation, surrounded by chosen family, Eliza Calloway danced to the music of the West, wild and sweet, challenging and rewarding. Exactly like the love that had grown from patient teaching and mutual courage. The virgin who'd sought work had found her life's calling, and in finding it, had helped others find theirs too. The water flowed, the trains ran, the community thrived, but at the heart of it all remained a simple truth. Sometimes the greatest adventures begin with desperate chances and forged letters, leading hearts home to places they never knew they were seeking. As the music played and her husband spun her under the vast Wyoming sky, Eliza smiled, knowing that every challenge had been worth this moment. The West had tested her, shaped her, and ultimately embraced her. And she, in turn, had helped shape it one meal, one ledger, one act of courage at a time. The virgin had gone west for work. The woman who remained had found everything. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale from. Whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps even somewhere out in the wide open spaces that inspired this story. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed Eliza and Jack's journey, please subscribe to Wild West Night for more authentic frontier romances. Hit that like button and give us a hype to help this story reach more listeners who appreciate tales of courage, community, and love forged in the American West. Your support helps keep these stories alive.